Hello and welcome to the Radiant Soul podcast with your host, Shirley. Did you forget just how amazing, beautiful and powerful you are, my love? Did you forget how innately worthy, deserving and lovable you are, and how infinitely abundant and rich you are as a soul living right now in this moment? It's okay. We live in a world where we are constantly bombarded with messaging and marketing that tells us we are lacking, incapable or not enough. This is the podcast to disrupt that pattern. We're going to bulldoze some beliefs and behaviors that don't serve us, and we're going to remind you just how perfect, whole, and awesome you are right now, helping you live your best life with full agency and remembrance of why you are here. I'm Shirley, a lifelong dedicated radiant soul, and I'll be your host as we journey deep and have fun learning how to live a radiant soul life that is your best life. But first, I wish to acknowledge, and please forgive any mispronunciation, that this podcast is being recorded in my home in Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke, which lies on unceded Indigenous lands and waters, which the Kanyen'kehá:ka Nation is recognised as the custodians, and I honour them, this land, and my ability to bring this podcast to you from here. Thank you for joining me, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi, welcome to this week's Radiant Soul podcast. Today I want to talk about your ego and your soul and how they both react to growth and evolution and what happens along that path that can trip us up or can really sort of help us unfold and become who we're becoming. And the thing is that your soul wants a level of evolutionary growth that is completely different to what your ego wants. So your ego, your nervous system as well, is also tied up with this. Wants comfort, it wants safety, it wants what it knows. It wants this like stability and belief that everything's going to be okay. It wants control, and it doesn't want the same thing as what your soul wants. And so also your ego may take on the guise of wanting a particular goal or a particular thing to come manifest, and it gets wrapped up in identity, and so it can be this like really tricky sort of thing to maneuver and to negotiate when we're trying to be a radiant soul in this world, right? But what your soul wants is very different. When your soul came into this world, it had its very unique set of desires that it wanted to manifest, and they would not necessarily be what you think that you want. They would be things that would cause spiritual growth, that would cause an evolution, that would cause a change in your vibrational alignment and frequency that isn't necessarily the same that would happen with what your ego wants. And so what I mean by that is, for instance, we may think we don't want difficulties and hardships. We may think we don't want poverty or grief or loss. We may think that we want the opposite. We may think that we want wealth and abundance, or, constantly to be happy all the time. But your soul doesn't actually necessarily want that. Your soul actually has a whole sort of blueprint that it's doing, like that it's taking you on, and a journey that produces an evolutionary level of growth. Now, at some point, maybe gaining wealth or gaining love or something in your life will help your soul evolve. And it often, I don't think there's any more spiritual journey than one of wealth and one of love, because what it really asks you to do is opening up your heart, opening up who you are, really examining who you are, especially in relationships with love. There's no bigger trigger to all of our traumas and unhealed mess and identities than a relationship, right? When it reflects that back to us. But your soul actually signed up for this. This is what makes your soul excited. Your soul wants to grow. Your soul wants to evolve. And it wants to take this path that is not in comfort, that is not in safety, because it wants to be pushing its edges. And often that can look like real difficulties and hardships, or a lack of money, or a lack of resources, or a lack of love, because where where you desire that, and where you're sort of in this position that you don't have those things, and your ego or your soul desire is to have these things. What the actual soul desire is to have the evolutionary growth that takes you from that place to that place, from poverty to wealth, from being lonely to having love, from all of these different things and states. My mind is blank right now thinking of other examples. So I'm just going to stick with those two, because those are generally the main two. And what your soul actually wants is this evolutionary growth. It wants to have those difficulties. It wants to sort of feel the contrast of not having, so that it can see all the places where it needs to release that belief, or it needs to unprogram that, or heal, or whatever it is, like whatever terminology you wish to use. I mean, I'm not a big fan of like being permanently in a state of healing, because that implies you're permanently in a state of needing to be healed, which is dis-ease. But what I'm saying is, we are all have been programmed in various points in our life to believe certain set of beliefs, whether they are cultural, whether they are familial, whether they are just your own, just from like being in a relationship with some person who made you feel a certain way. Like, we have these beliefs and conditions that we kind of live by. And your soul wants to evolve, your soul wants to grow, and it wants to push those boundaries continuously. So often that feels like discomfort, and it feels like what's the opposite of safety? Unsafety. Danger. It feels dangerous, right? And for your ego, it's terrifying, because your ego and your nervous system really needs equilibrium. It really needs to stay stable and safe and secure, and it certainly doesn't want to be pushed. And so your ego will kick off. And so what can often happen is, when we're in a process of bringing forth a new layer of evolving and a new layer of stepping into our radiant soul being, is it can feel like hell. It can feel uncomfortable as hell. It can bring up all kinds of stuff to the surface that you thought you'd healed, or was in your past, or it can bring mirrors into your life that reflect those things. So for instance, perhaps you're an online person, a business entrepreneur, and you get bad comments on your posts, or you get like the trolls coming at you. And it's like we get those mirrors that come back at us. Like, what are they mirroring to me that is inside of myself, right? And that can be really difficult. That can be completely, like, I'm going to say soul destroying, but it's like completely an oxymoron, because that's not true. It's like, it's ego destroying. It's only ever ego destroying. It's never soul destroying, because your soul, like, if you just really tap into it and feel into it, and I think there's a book called Existential Kink that deals with this and talks about, like, what it is that we actually think we want, versus what it is we have and we think we don't want. And when we really let ourselves want what we have right now, which might not look great, that the feeling of excitement and bliss and sort of like joy and pleasure that bubbles up is your soul like saying, yes, like, this is what I want. This is the growth I want. But it can feel like death to the ego, which is kind of what we identify with. It's like our personality, right? It's our identity. I feel like I'm dying, and everything's going wrong, and like, what am I doing? And everything's against me. Like, this is the dialogue we tell ourselves when it feels like that. But what it is actually, it's like, it's not soul destroying, it's ego destroying. And that's a beautiful thing, because when you release your ego, when you release any identity attached to anything, you're free, right? You're just completely free. And that's the most beautiful, wonderful, liberating state. And I had to go on this journey with my art business, right? Being the artist. And I grew up all the time, like, oh, you're the emotional artist. You're the artistic one who's emotional. And like, had all these labels sort of put on me. And yeah, I'm emotional. I'm just highly sensitive, right? Whatever. But, there was this time when it was like, when I graduated from my fine art degree, that I felt like, every piece of art was like me bearing my soul, and I couldn't handle any criticism. And it was just because my ego was so wrapped up in being an artist. And And like, I really had to kind of let that artist ego die. And now I actually really don't like saying I'm an artist. Like, I am. I just paint. It's like one of the mediums I use, right? And this is one of the things I enjoy doing. I enjoy doing this, and I enjoy painting. But there's no identity or ego wrapped up in it. If I couldn't paint tomorrow or for the rest of my life, I'd be like, whatever, like, I'll just move on to something else, or just find like the joy in something else, because I don't have that identity wrapped up in it. And that's the problem, right? Is we wrap ourselves around an identity, around an ego. Like, our ego sort of wraps itself around these things, and that's what feels off when we're going into soul evolutionary growth, and things start coming to the surface, and life starts like throwing us poop, right? And we just feel like we're doing something wrong. It's not that we're doing anything wrong. We're doing everything right. But what we're not doing is disassociating from that ego. We're well and truly identified with that ego. And so it feels like hell. It feels horrible. It feels like we're under attack. When in actual fact, if you can just take a little step back and see that that's not who you are. Your essence is just one of pure awareness. It's your God state is pure awareness. It's the I am presence. And if you can just take that step back to do that, and you can use meditation, you can just breathe, you can just like put everything down and just like come back to center, coming back to yourself. It opens up the ability for you to sort of distance yourself a little bit from your ego and realize that there's nothing soul destroying going on here. There's only ego destroying, and that you're safe. And if you can nurture and provide your nervous system with the support it needs to feel safe as you go through these evolutionary steps, it makes everything a whole lot better. It makes everything a whole lot easier, because not only is your ego like, if you're not doing that, your ego will go into sort of like, this is killing me, I'm going to fight for my life type energy. But also your nervous system will go into trauma response. And so holding yourself in that physically, giving your nervous system what it needs. You can do like havening, which is like stroking your arms, which can soothe you. You can tap, you can do EFT. There are many modalities, EMDR, there are many modalities you can use to calm your nervous system down. Even just like being calm and silent and stroking yourself for a little bit, like anything like that can bring you back to a state of calmness, so that your nervous system can go through the change with your soul, right? Because your soul actually really wants it. And your soul is rejoicing. Your soul is welcoming in the difficulties because of all of the like jewels that can be mined there, right? But your ego is going, no, there's no jewels there. The jewels are all over there. You've got to run over there. Like there's nothing here. This is the worst thing in the world. When it's standing in like the treasure trove of your soul, right? It's standing in exactly what your soul wants. I think my phone is ringing somewhere, so excuse any buzzing. And allowing yourself that grace to calm your nervous system, to step back a little bit and notice that it's an ego reaction and not a soul reaction. And it's really interesting because there's also a flip side to this. So where your soul's growth feels like death, like to your ego, which feels like death to you, like it feels awful. The opposite of that is that your soul, like when you're not allowing your soul to grow, your ego feels comfortable and safe. But over time, that is what's soul destroying. Over time, that takes the energy, the life force, the joy, the vibrancy, the vitality, the energy out of your soul. Like it like sucks the life out of your soul. And like that is what happens. Like that's why we end up like demising and dying eventually, is because we gradually remove the will to live. And the will to live is constantly more growth. And it's not necessarily more in terms of material matters, but it's like more in terms of evolutionary growth, in terms of everything. It's like allowing that process, allowing ourselves to expand, to follow that curiosity, to do this, to do that, even if it's scary, even if it means pushing yourself right outside of your comfort zone. The allowance of that brings more life, right? It's the emergence of life within you. It's not anything coming out like from outside to come into you. It's like what wants to come through you. And if you block that, if you don't allow that to happen, or you stay small, you stay in your comfort zone, and you never allow that, then you're gradually killing yourself. You're gradually like losing the will to live. You're killing your soul off. You're basically saying there's no more life to live here. There's no more, there's nothing more I want to come through here. So it's blocking it off. And then we wonder why our flow of abundance, our flow of wealth, money, love, resources, whatever, is blocked. We wonder why we can't seem to grow or move. And it's because we cut ourselves off and we close ourselves off, because soul growth hurts. Soul growth feels painful at times. Soul growth feels like a destruction of the ego. It feels like a soul destroying thing, but it's not a soul destroying thing. It is an ego destroying thing. And I cannot say that enough, because that's exactly what happens. So just knowing that when your soul is growing and, really evolving, it's not going to feel great. Giving your nervous system what it needs to feel safe in that, but also giving yourself the ability to step back and observe that you are not your ego, you are not that identity, and it is safe for that to come to its end, to pass away, for you to be clear, for you to be a radiant soul, for you to be allowing more and more life and energy to come through you. And I've been doing a bit of research and looking into like regenerative farming processes in the last few months, and I was listening to a podcast of this guy talking about it, and he was saying, it's amazing how when we allow that soil the space to be, and we stop trying to like force it to be something else, like life just gets in, life just comes through and in abundance so quickly. And that's exactly what we do with ourselves, right? When we allow ourselves to be in the dirt, when we allow ourselves to allow what's rotting and for decomposing and what seems like waste to be there, or seems like something we don't want to be there, when we actually like look at it with a fine microscope and kind of say, well, what are the jewels here? What are the amazing, gifts here? And we can start to see all of the life trying to come through that. We can start to see the life, what's inside us emerging out of us. And that's the gift, right? And that's what your soul wants, like more than anything. That's what your soul wants. And giving yourself that gift, that it's okay for things to not look how you think your ego wants them to look. It's like absolutely okay, because so much more is wanting to come out. So much more is within you wanting to come out. Like, what is that? And can you give it the space? Can you give yourself the comfort and safety and nervous system regulation that you need to allow that to come through? And it doesn't have to rush through. Like, it doesn't matter if, I am totally a dip my toes in very slowly kind of person. Like, I don't like diving in. Never have done. I'm a good swimmer. I still don't like getting my face and head wet unless I've got goggles, right? But in life, I'm the same. I want to kind of know I'm safe and protected, and I allow myself that grace. And that's what I'm saying to you, like, allow yourself the grace. You don't need to like suddenly be like, boom, I've got it straight away, because again, that's not really growth, is it? Like, if you're just given everything that you want straight away, or like, there's no growth in that. There's no journey. And your soul doesn't want the end result. Your soul wants the journey. And then when it gets to the end result, it's brilliant. It can enjoy it, but it's not attached to it. And it wants the next journey. It wants the next journey. And it wants the evolution. So giving yourself the grace to have that, and remembering you're not your ego, you're not your identity. You are the I am presence. You are God's state. You are God's self. You are calmness and awareness. So I hope that's helped you today. And thank you for listening. And I love you, as always. To find out more about how to work with me, then visit soulartbyshirley.com for art, commissions and courses. And if you love this podcast, please hit subscribe and leave a review. And if you take a screenshot of your review and email it to soulartbyshirley@gmail.com, I'll send you a Radiant Soul Hypnosis as a thank you gift. Thank you for listening. I love you. Bye.